tension continues at the border with Belarus. For many months, the Polish-Belarusian border has been tested in every possible way by Russia and Belarus. The situation on Poland's eastern border and NATO's eastern flank is becoming increasingly worrying. We have been seeing this for many months, and if we look at it from the perspective of the last year, there have been more and more violations of Polish airspace. As we read on the Niezależna portal, residents of the border town of Samowicz in the municipality of Terespol reported drones flying over their homes. Alarmed by what was happening outside their homes at night, flying unmanned aerial vehicles, they asked for some kind of intervention because they could not find any information about what was really going on. That is why, from early morning, journalists from Niezależna tried to contact various services about this matter. There was deafening silence on the phones of the police, the Polish border guard, and the Polish Armed Forces Operational Command spokespeople. The announcement came only after 12 hours from the moment the residents noticed drones flying near their homes. We would like to inform you that on Wednesday, January 21st, 2026, in the evening, increased activity of small unmanned aerial vehicles operating over the Polish-Belarusian border was observed. This activity was continuously monitored by military radar systems. No threat to the security of Polish airspace was identified. The lack of threat is certainly good news, but reporting on such a serious matter with a delay of several hours is not necessarily so. The government is unable to communicate, warn people, and explain what is happening. There is silence for hours, and people are in a panic, which naturally fuels panic, anxiety, and a feeling that no one is watching over our safety. This is another example of chaos and ineffective information policy. Suffice it to recall the situation a few days ago, when the Niezależna.pl portal reported on 16 balloons that flew into Poland from across the eastern border. The border guard initially denied this information, calling it fake news. On Sunday, no objects crossed the Polish border. Such an incident took place on Friday night, which we reported accurately. Please do not spread false information. However, a day later, this information was no longer fake news, but a fact. This was confirmed in a conversation with us by the border guard itself. Did weather balloons cross the Polish border on Sunday? Less than 24 hours earlier, on the night from Friday into Saturday morning, several dozen balloons violated Polish airspace, which we were the first to report. One of these objects fell in the center of Białystok. Experts warn that these are deliberate provocations. It is easy to imagine how this situation affects the sense of security and stability of Poles living near the border with Belarus or Ukraine. When it comes to the sense of security of Poles in border areas, it is simply getting worse and worse. Our neighbors are getting more and more daring, and this is not met with a decisive response. Balloons and drones from the east are unfortunately violating Polish airspace without any problems. It is enough to look at what has been happening in recent months. Several dozen Russian drones flew into Poland in September. There are many indications that not all of them have been found yet. On the night of December 24th into the 25th, 59 smuggling balloons containing, among other things, GPS transmitters entered Poland from Belarus. At that time, our television station was also the first to report on this. As the National Security Bureau pointed out, it was a provocation under the guise of smuggling. The Polish authorities are not drawing the right conclusions from the constant provocations on the part of Belarus and Russia. In addition, it would also be useful to have up-to-date information and control over the communication chaos. On Tuesday evening, a train derailed near Miechów in the Lower Poland region. The incident was caused by low temperatures and a broken rail. The derailment of part of the Polregio train traveling from Kielce to Kraków occurred on Tuesday after 9 p.m. near Miechów in the Lesser Poland Voivodeship. There were about 20 people on board, but fortunately no one was hurt. TV Republika was the first television station to report directly from the scene. The derailment occurred after 9 p.m. in Smroków, not far from the train station here. As it turns out, drivers of other trains had been reporting problems with the condition of the tracks on this this section since 6 p.m. This information was obtained by MP Paulina Matysiak. No action was taken, nor there were any recommendations made to, for example, introduce speed restrictions on this section, or to order cautionary driving, or to send an appropriate unit there to check, or to close the track. It is scandalous that no one from the services went to the site to check the unevenness before the train derailed. In fact, the warning of one train driver was ignored. As train drivers, we take this very seriously. Unfortunately, the signals given by train drivers are downplayed. To our knowledge, more than 2 hours passed from the moment the report was made. Without checking it, another train was sent. The services only took action after the regional train derailed. PKP Polish Railway Lines responded to our questions in this way. Good morning. The matter is being investigated. The traffic controller instructed the train drivers to observe the track after the first signal of a possible unevenness. Not all train drivers confirmed the presence of unevenness. We are not currently speculating on the causes of the incident on the Miechów-Słomniki route. They are being investigated by a specially appointed commission, which will provide detailed answers to any questions that arise. Best regards, Piotr Hamarnik, Press Team Polish Railway Lines SA. Although PKP Polish Railway Lines assures us today that the Commission is still working and has 30 days to explain the causes of the train derailment, the Lesser Poland Police and the Polish Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, already have their opinion. The Railway Commission conducting activities at the scene of the incident ruled out external interference. The rail was naturally dislodged due to low temperatures. No elements related to explosives were detected. Everything indicates, as the investigation is still ongoing, that this is 99% the result of wear and tear, material exhaustion, and frost. This required the repair of 200 meters of track. The work took almost 2 days. I am upset that we have no information from the Ministry of Infrastructure what really happened and in what order. The Polish Minister of Infrastructure, Dariusz Klimczak, bears political responsibility for the train derailment. However, government politicians are disregarding his responsibility. The minister will not deal with a single track. That is what procedures and people are for. And yet 2 months ago, there were acts of sabotage on the Polish railways. 12 trains ran over the blown-up tracks. The train drivers also raised the alarm at the time. The government and the services reacted very late. Fortunately, no one was hurt. It turns out that we don't need any saboteurs because we ourselves are unable to ensure the safety of passengers, employees, train drivers, and conductors. The last few weeks have been a real nightmare for travelers, as it is difficult to count on trains arriving on time, and many trains do not arrive at all. Mr. Minister, please come out and tell Poles which trains will be cancelled today and in the coming days, because it is scandalous that travelers cannot plan their journeys. Thank you. The first days of January and heavy snowfall led to train service disruptions, snow-covered train stations, delayed trains, stops in the middle of nowhere. Today, however, the situation is still difficult. I left Wrocław by train at 6:45 a.m. If all goes well, I might make it to Warsaw by 2 p.m. In 3 weeks, I have experienced 2 canceled trains and a dozen or so delayed trains. Only 2 trains arrived on schedule. This is not a delay, it is transport absurdity and a joke. For weeks, huge delays, canceled trains, no reliable announcements, and zero control over the situation. Can Minister Dariusz Klimczak finally take an interest in the issue and deal with this irrational situation? Our reporter has had similar experiences with Polish railways. Between September and December, I traveled from Gdańsk to Warsaw exactly 12 times, always on the same day, Tuesday, on the morning train that leaves Gdańsk at 4 a.m. and arrives in Warsaw at 8 a.m. Not once did it arrive on time. Not once. The delays ranged from 10 minutes and an hour. It should be noted that this was before the cold weather set in. The Blask online portal described journalist Małgorzata Obczowska's train journey. Małgorzata Obczowska dreamed of a peaceful, comfortable journey in the premium class, Pendolino, a warm carriage, soft seats, maybe even a cup of coffee in her hand. Reality? As usual, usual, Polish Railways decided to bring her down to earth, and quite brutally at that. What is happening now at PKP is simply total Armageddon, total chaos. The journalist was traveling from Warsaw to Kraków. There was a delay at the start, and on top of that, there was no heating on the train. A ticket for this train, the Pendolino, from Warsaw to Kraków costs over 200 zł per person, and in first class it is almost twice as much, and for this price you get a 90-minute delay and severe exposure to the cold, which can result in a bad cold. So well done, PKP. Despite this, PKP PLK assures us that dispatchers are ensuring safe, smooth, and punctual train traffic. The Ministry of Infrastructure says it's great, but what is the reality? Several dozen trains have been cancelled, and passengers are unsure whether they will reach their destination. The government is apparently applying the principle of the former Minister of Infrastructure and Development in Donald Tusk's first government, Elżbieta Bieńkowska. Sorry, that's the climate we have. U.S. President Donald Trump's harsh words about NATO and the involvement of allies in Afghanistan sparked a wave of criticism. The accusations concern the alleged undermining of the alliance's purpose and belittling the sacrifices of allied soldiers. These are controversial statements, but their meaning is often simplified today. As analysts point out, Trump was referring not to soldiers, but to the structure of countries' involvement in military operations. In Afghanistan and Iraq, the United States bore the brunt of the combat operations, from the front lines, through aviation and logistics, to intelligence and technology. American forces were responsible for most offensive operations and mission security. European countries also participated in the operations, but often to a lesser extent. Trump was referring to this disproportion, without, however, undermining the sacrifice of NATO soldiers.
We get along very well with NATO, I think, but I've always said, will they be there if we ever needed them? And that's really the ultimate test, and I'm not sure of that. I know that we would have been there, or we would be there, but will they be there? And let's hope that that never happens. We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that, and they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines, but we've been very good to Europe and to many other countries.
These words are harsh and undoubtedly controversial, but in terms of facts, Trump is talking about the structure of operations, not the value of soldiers. No one questions the courage and dedication of the soldiers of NATO countries who took part in combat missions. In Davos, this context was also emphasized by the NATO Secretary General, who openly admitted that pressure from Trump had a real impact on European defense policy. The Polish president also pointed to the scale of the imbalance in the funding of the alliance. The data is clear. The United States currently bears the greatest burden of maintaining NATO's defense capabilities. According to experts, this is the element that is most often overlooked in public debate. Criticism of Trump focuses on style, rather than whether his diagnosis of military funding and capabilities was accurate. American pressure regarding Donald Trump's policy, even the issue of increasing defense spending, it must be admitted that this was an excellent idea, and its implementation was also perfectly timed and woven into the events around us, where we can clearly see that more and more European countries are gradually increasing their defense spending to well above 2% of GDP. The second aspect of this discussion concerns the global projection of U.S. power. The U.S. maintains a military presence and security guarantees not only in Europe, but also in Asia and the Middle East. Trump has repeatedly emphasized that such a role requires real cooperation from allies. All of the countries involved spend less than the United States currently does. The Americans have over 50 defense alliances, purely defensive ones, that is, commitments in case something happens. No other country has such influence in relationships. This has been built up over decades, which is why the Americans are still a superpower. In this sense, the dispute over Trump's words is not about whether NATO is necessary or whether the sacrifice of soldiers was real. It concerns the question of how to share responsibility in a world where threats are becoming increasingly real. One can criticize Donald Trump's language and his way of communicating. However, it is more difficult to ignore the facts he refers to. Today, the debate about NATO is not a dispute about solidarity itself, but about how to realistically finance and maintain it.